This video will illustrate the PathDesigner radio script builder that's been created specifically for Sprint. The video will be done in 6 steps. The first step is the creation of scripts from data which already exists in the tool, and we'll use existing script templates. The second step will be to show you the editor where the templates are built. These templates are used to create actual scripts, and real path and site data and radio data will be inserted into them, into the template, and creating the actual files. The script editor will then be shown in terms of editing an existing script. That's very useful for very large scripts that have been given to us for specific radios as samples, and we can just edit them to be more generic templates to be used with PathDesigner. The fourth step is to load the Sprint CIQ-XL file data into PathDesigner. In the first 3 steps, I'm using existing data in the tool just so I can show you the script editor quickly. But the fourth step would really normally be done first, that is loading the CIQ file data. It creates path, site, and radio records when we load it. Then in the 5th step, I'll show you how to create real scripts using that CIQ loaded data. And lastly, I'll show you the parameters that we extracted from the CIQ sheet in building the records within PathDesigner for site, path, and radio records, which ultimately ends up in these scripts. So I'll bring up PathDesigner. This is the main form of PathDesigner. It has, as I said, existing data. I'll show you very quickly the paths in the system. It comes up with 2 views, but essentially these are the lists of sites that were loaded, or rather paths, that were loaded from the CIQ file. There's also radios that were loaded from that same file. These are Saragon IP20C radios, and we'll talk more about how that's all loaded later. So in order to create a script in the Path Manager, we choose the paths that are of interest to us. We can choose as many or as few of them as we wish, and we can filter the view. So if we only wanted to see 18 gig, we could filter 18 gigs and then just select the ones we're interested in. So we select the paths, and under our utility menu there's a radio script, create radio script for selected paths selector, and then we have a choice of templates. This one is one that was created based upon an existing sample that was given, and this was just a sample for testing the editing, and I'll show you them. We can create as many as we wish. This could be a very long list. So I'll start by just running this single one for those 4 paths I've selected, and it's done. It's created them, and it's given me a message saying it's done. I go into the folder for that project, and this actually is a folder on my desktop for Sprint radio scripts. It's essentially my project folder. In here it's created a radio scripts subfolder, and the ones I just created, it's at 9:18 in the morning here, so it's just created these guys here, and actually the ones at the top, we just sorted by time. So the ones at the top here were all just created, and I'll just open one to show you. And as I say, this was based upon a script that I was given, so essentially it's been adjusted by the tool for the specific paths that are selected. Okay, so that's the first step in my presentation, which is creation of script from existing data. The second step is to show you how we build a simple script template, and I'll do that before we actually work with a real one, just so you get the mechanics of how that editor will work. So if I go back to my main form, under utility I have a radio script editor, and it comes up blank unless I've had something loaded previously. And this large white area is essentially where I would build the script that I want, and the long bar at the top would be the name of the script. So I'll start by typing in here. Essentially it could be anything, but I'll just do something here. So my script for path, I don't know, let's just put X, Y, Z for now, at site ABC is shown here, and I'll just stop there. I can put as many lines as I want. So instead of having this XYZ, where that XYZ is, I just put my cursor at the front and I select the path ID because that's the identifier for the path, and I insert it. And I can delete the XYZs, and you'll see that it's given me these double brace bracket, or square brackets highlighted for path ID. This is a tag the tool understands as a parameter. It has to go and find and replace with real path IDs when it runs the real scripts. Now site ABC, I'm going to insert path end sites, as I can put in specific A or B sites. A and B is the way they're stored in the tool, but path end sites is more generic, and I'll explain that in a second. I'll just erase the ABC. My path end site says that when I'm running a path script, it does two scripts, one for each end site. So this variable here will be replaced first by the A site and then by the B site in the second script. Now I can continue this as much as I want, and I can put in all of the parameters are listed here, and it can be expanded if needed. Now to save the file, I have to give it a name, a script name, so I'll call it, I don't know, test script, and I'll say for path and site. Okay, so here I need, as the note at the top in the header says, I have to include path ID and the site end. The reason is that it creates a file which is stored with many other files in the same folder. They have to have a unique name. So the way I've created a unique name, which I believe aligns with the way that Sprint has been doing it, is I use path ID and path end site in the name. So again, I'll just insert path ID, and here site, path end site, insert. So this is the name of the script, and when it's actually, as I say, when the file is actually created, it will insert the correct parameters there. I save the script. Okay. Now this has now been added to my selector, so I have now three possible scripts. So the one I showed you earlier was this guy, which was the big one, and you can see the same concepts here where things have been inserted. They're in bold. And then the one that we just created, I believe was this guy, yes. So that's essentially how you edit and save a script from scratch. And I can show you how to create scripts using this new one we've just created. First I'll delete the scripts that we created earlier and the old ones that were there previously, just so we have an empty folder. I'll go back into my Path Manager. Let's just choose a couple of different ones. Now I can go to my menu as I did before and select this one, which I just created, or I can actually do it right from the editor if I wish, using this button, Create Scripts, and it tells me that they're done and they're here. And if I open one of them, you'll see it's very simple, and it's comparing it with the text here. You can see it's replaced the path ID in bold with this path ID, and it's replaced this SA90 with what was previously path end sites in brackets. So it understands the bold square brackets. And if you look at the name of the file, you'll see the same thing, test script for path and then the path ID and so on. So that way we have unique file names in this folder. Okay, so I just delete those so I can keep track of it when we're doing the next go around. Excuse me. Okay, so let's choose another large one. So this is one, as I said, which was given to me that I edited. So I can actually load an example that I was given from Sprint. So let's just say grab this as a text file, I'll copy it all and delete all of this, and I'll paste in what I just copied. So this came from this guy, which was our sample. And if I decide I want to use this as my starting point to build a template, I would then start editing the thing. So assume, say this is the site ID. So I just put the cursor at the beginning of it, and it's on path end sites, and I insert it, and then I delete this guy. And say there's my link ID here. So I just insert path ID and delete this. and continue down until I've done everything I think I want to do, and I'll give it a new name. I don't know, let's call it B, I don't know, whatever. Okay, save. So now I've got another script which I just created, which is this guy, this B guy. Okay, so that's how we do the third step, which is to build, or rather to edit an existing real script. And again, we can run it the same as we have previously. So now I'm going to show you how we load the script Sprint CIQ file into PathDesigner. And just to make this simple, I will start by clearing out everything that's in the tool first. There's a clear all data function here. And we'll bring up the path manager and you can see it's empty. Sites are empty. This is a site list, and the radios, and I could continue with the antennas and so on. It's all empty. Now, sorry, it's not what I wish to do. Okay, so I can go into my PathDesigner menu and I have a new entry for read-in Sprint Vision CIQ XL file. I click on that, and it happens that I browsed previously to the correct folder, so it came up with this folder. This is the spreadsheet sample that I was given, CIQ. I just select it and open it. And when it's done, it gives me a message that it's completed. Now if I go look in my paths, I see the paths that it loaded. I can show you a little bit of detail, double click it and bring up the detail editor, and in here you can see the host names and network elements and so on that were added to here. Now these may or may not be correct. We can adjust them. Well, within this environment we can edit them, but in building this feature, if we wish to arrange selections from different fields in that spreadsheet, it's easy to do. The radios are up here for the two ends, and if I want to see the details, I can click on this information button. It brings me into my radio manager that shows me the details that it is extracted out of the spreadsheet and loaded into this form. So that's how the data from the CIQ is loaded. I should mention that the sites, as I said previously, are pretty thin. There's not much information. We have a list of sites. They're identified as new because I just loaded them, but there's no details behind them because that spreadsheet did not contain any details. Also mention that if the sites or paths already exist in the tool and they have a lot of data in them, for example, so if they're existing records and I read in the CIQ file, it will update the existing records with whatever new information is made available, but it will not replace them. In other words, it won't end up with duplicate records. Okay, let's create real scripts from the loaded data. Okay, we can do that. Let's close the script editor because I don't need it open. And so I'll go back here. I'll choose again, I don't know, a couple of paths, and from my menu, actually I'll clear out the scripts that are in the folder. Not here, wrong folder. Radial scripts. Okay, it's empty already. So I've selected my paths and I will create my scripts, and we'll use this guy again, and it's created them. You'll notice there's 4 because we have 2 paths and there's 2 end sites, so it makes 4. If I open them, it's essentially here, and you can see that it's put in the right values in various places. And the last thing is the parameters that are extracted from the CIQ sheet and how they're saved in PathDesigner. So if I'll just bring up a sample path here. And as I said, there's these fields here, and there's also in the radio manager, there's a number of fields. So to power the throughput, the radio models, and so on. I created a radio family called Sprint CIQ import. If that's inappropriate, it can easily be edited. Okay, this spreadsheet, somewhat messy spreadsheet, shows you how the data was loaded for the IP portions of the input. So these are from the headers of the CIQ sheet, which is in the bottom part here. I've extracted the ones that I thought were appropriate and color coding so at least to some degree, represents what was in this sheet. These are the names I extracted from the two types, and these are the columns by letter and by number. So these are the parameters that ended up in PathDesigner, which are in these fields here. The other fields for the radio were fairly self-evident, and spreadsheet. Actually, I can give you a proper presentation of the spreadsheet on a spreadsheet, rather on a PowerPoint slide of what all the parameters are in a cleaner fashion than this.